Hey, what is going on YouTube? In today's video, I wanted to get into a introductory tutorial for setting up your first EC2 instance. Now, the reason why I want to do this is because over the last couple of months, I have been doing more and more AWS videos, and I figured in a lot of these videos, I'm kind of skipping over the basics. So I kind of wanted to start doing a couple videos here and there that are just the basic tutorials to give you guys a better understanding of the fundamentals, so you could go ahead and build upon that as I build out these other tutorials. For instance, here's a CloudFormation. Again, this is a beginner tutorial, but in that we spin up some EC2 instances using a CloudFormation template. Here's some Lambda function to go ahead and shut that down to save you some money. Let's see, we have another web server here, which is with GitLab, and we deployed it. Deployed our web server using a automation or the pipeline. And there's a few others I think on here that we have as far as AWS goes. So that is kind of why I want to cover the just the basic setup on how to set up your EC2 instance, how you get into it, and more specifically, we're going to talk about the Linux instance today, and maybe in a future video we'll talk about Windows and so on. So with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, so for the very first step, you're going to head over to the top if you do not have a recently visited EC2 instance. So we're going to go to EC2, and then we're just going to go ahead and open that up. I would also suggest that you set up an IAM user and not use your root account, which is something that we could also cover in a future video. Once you are on the EC2 instance page, go down here until you see Launch Instance. Over the last couple of years, there has been some changes to the UI, and I feel like this is definitely the best way or the best version of it. So here at the top, you're going to have a name. So we'll just do test EC2. And you could also add additional tags here if you would like. So here in this case, we're going to do the tag name, or the key for tag is name, and then we're going to give it a value of test EC2. Next, you have your AMI or your Amazon machine image, and here is just a template file of the various operating systems that are available to you. And as you can see here, that is coming from AWS, the marketplace, and the community. So we have some examples here. So we have AWS, Amazon Linux image, Mac OS, Ubuntu, Windows, Red Hat, and a few others, and then you could get some more in there. In this case, for the lab, we're going to go ahead and select Ubuntu. And as you can see here, this is the different types. So in this case, we have the Ubuntu server here, and you can see that it is free tier eligible. You could select your architecture here. In this case, we want to do x86. Otherwise, you do have the ARM option. This is something important. So if you were to select your Amazon AWS image, you're going to see that we're going to have a different username here. Back, it is actually going to change some of the options. So I might just refresh this because sometimes it gets kind of, there we go. So it says it's going to change it. So we'll just confirm changes. I wanted to point this out. So this is the username for this image here. But if we're using Ubuntu, which is what we're doing in today's lab, it's going to be the username Ubuntu as it is usually. Next, if we keep on scrolling down, you will see the instance type. Here's pretty much the hardware that you are going to get with this selection. So in this case, if we select the T2 Micro, we're going to get one CPU with 1 GB of memory, and it kind of breaks down the pricing. You could also find this in the documentation, obviously, but this just kind of gives you a quick oversight exactly to what you are picking. For most of my labs, I kind of just select the T2 Micro, depending on what I'm doing, or I go up a little bit higher if I need a little bit of memory or a little bit more CPUs. But in this case, a T2 Micro will be just fine. Next important piece is going to be the key pair. So this is going to be what you need in order to log into that server. So there will be, if you already had created one, you will have that option to go down here and then select it. So in this case, I just have one key pair, which is test. But for the purpose of this video, we'll go to the right side and we'll create a new key pair. And we'll just go ahead and say test EC2. We will leave the default options here as RSA, and it will be a .pem file. The reason why this is important is because if you do not do this, if you select nothing here and you start up an EC2 instance, you will not be able to get into it. Now, if you created an EC2 instance without it and you create a key pair after, that will still not work because you need to get the you need to do it on startup so you could get the public key information inside of the authorized key file when I'm talking about for like an Ubuntu instance. So you definitely want to get this set up before. Also, as you might have seen, that after you set this up, you will download automatically the private key pair, and that is what you would need if you wanted to get into it from your local machine. That is not stored in AWS by default. Next, if you keep on scrolling down, you get to the network settings. Here, we're going to have the network, so by default. So if we go into here, we'll kind of just see the different options that are available to us. In another video, we'll break it down, VPCs, but in this case, this is the default VPC, and I do have a few others. This should be deleted. You have a subnet, there's no preference, or if you want to select one which is, in different availability zones, you can go ahead and do that. In this case, no preference is just fine. Auto assign a public IP address. I do suggest doing that if you are trying to get into it. Otherwise, the other option would be you would have to set up another public EC2 instance, and then you could set up some peering or some routing, and then you could get into it that way. But in this case, if you wanted to get into it from the EC2 instance connect or from your local machine, you will have to do it. Auto assign a public IP address. Next, you have the firewall or the security groups, and that is going to add egress and ingress rules into your EC2 instance. So if you wanted to allow port 22, which is what you can see down here, SSH connection into your EC2 instance, you will have to allow that in your security group. It gives you the ability to create a new security group in this prompt, or you could go ahead and select an existing one if you have one already set up. In this case, we're just going to go ahead again and do test EC2, and that's going to create a new security group. And these are going to be the default rules, and this is all we need for the time being. So we have SSH, port 22, from anywhere, and then yeah, that's going to be it for this. Obviously, if you wanted to make it less or more restricted, you could change this, go to custom, add an IP address, but in this case we're just trying to get into it, and it gives you a little warning here saying that 0.0.0.0 with a CIDR of 0 will allow all IP addresses to access your instance, and that's just fine for today. And then you have the ability to add more security group rules. But in this case, that is just going to be fine. Next, you have your storage. In this case, we're just going to leave this default. And in this case, we're pretty much just asking for 8 gigabytes. You also have additional options down here for advanced details. And in here, you can join a domain. You can set up an instance profile. So in this case, if you have a role that is for an EC2 service, you can go ahead and assign that here. So for instance, in our CloudWatch tutorial that is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, that is something that we will be doing. And I'll just add it now so you can see what I mean as we get into it after. Just some different options here: auto recovery, shutdown behavior, hibernate. Pretty self-explanatory for most of this, and great info is also, if you click on the info, you will get additional information here, which is great. You also have some purchasing options, so mainly the spot instances, which I believe, if I remember correctly, is 70% off or something like that. Maybe 90% off actually for spot. And that's pretty much going to be, as far as the basics goes, that's going to cover most of what is required for this. The other thing that you have the ability to do, so after you spin this up, let's say you want to get more than one instance, you could go ahead and specify the number of instances here. And then once you're done, go ahead and click on Launch Instance. All right, once you get that success message, go ahead and click on here, and you will get a list of your EC2 instances. And in this case, it is going to be obviously the one we just clicked on. It's currently in the running instance state, and it is initializing. Just to get more information on it before we try to SSH into it, if you click on the little checkbox here on the left, you kind of get a quick breakdown of exactly what we had just defined. In this case, this is going to be the instance ID. You have the public IP addresses here, which is the setting that we had assigned for automatic public IP address. You have a private IP address. Now this ties back to the VPC and the subnet that's associated with it. And in those will be a route table, which we could talk about in another video. Here's your public IP v4 DNS. So you can resolve this DNS name instead of using the IP address. Same thing for the private IP address. Elastic IP is a static IP that is not defined at this time. VPC ID, which is what we had defined. Here's the subnet ID that we said no preference to. Here's the ARN for the instance, AMI ID. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. These are all the options, like I said, that we had defined. Now, if you go over to security, you will see that we have the security groups here, and we're going to have 2 rules. So by default, we get outbound rules on all and all to any destination. And then we're also going to get the specified 22 from the port range from any source 0.0.0.0. And that's going to allow us to SSH into this. And you can see we also have that IAM role here. So if we clicked on this, you can see the various policies and stuff that are assigned to that IAM role. In this case, we had set up the CloudWatch agent server policy, and we had attached it to this role. Same with the Amazon SSM managed instance core policy. You also have the monitoring tab, and here this is not set up by default. This is something that we're going to cover in another video with the CloudWatch agent status and alarms working. It's kind of some of what we already seen on the first page. Here's going to be your interface ID or your interface that gets assigned. This is the different IP address and DNS information along with your subnet. And then you have your tags if you had any specified. In this case, we just had that name tag with the value of test EC2. All right. So I'm going to show you how to get into this machine. But first, just to show you that if you grab this DNS name and we go ahead and try to resolve it by using NSLookup, we should be able to get that IP address, which is 100.26.45.254. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. So we know this is our EC2 instance, and we are able to resolve it using the public DNS name. So we have 2 ways of connecting to it. So first, we're going to go, before we go into the PowerShell and connect to it from our local machine, you have the ability to go here at the top, click on Connect. And then using the EC2 instance connect, by default, you have this option available to you if it is in a public subnet and it has a internet gateway attached to it and routing to the internet. And this is the username, like I mentioned, the Ubuntu. So if it was something different, you would want to specify that here. And then just go ahead and click on Connect. All right, so once that is connected, you pretty much have your terminal. Not much to it than any other Linux machine, but that is your way, one way of connecting to the EC2 instance. The next way is to go through your local machine using PowerShell or command prompt or whatever SSH terminal that you would like to use. In this case, we're going to use PowerShell. I'm going to go ahead and grab that private key. Hold on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that public IP address, copy that over, and then we're just going to go ahead SSH, and then we're going to specify the -i, which is the identity file, and then we're going to grab that one that we had just downloaded, and we'll say test ec2.pem, and we should be able to get right in. Right, so one thing that I'm going to do is, since I have my SSH agent configured and it's trying to SSH into it with multiple keys, and that's when I'm getting those authentication failure. So in this case, we're just going to specify the -o option. You might not have to do this depending on what is set up in your lab or in your computer. So in this case, -o identities only equals yes. That means we'll only use these here. So if I go ahead, and this you probably will run into, go ahead and try to SSH, you're going to get a failure because it is failing due to bad permissions. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick. All right, so find the private key that you had just downloaded. In this case, it was in my downloads folder. I moved it to a temporary folder just for ease of viewing. Go ahead and just right click it. There's different ways around this. Go ahead and right click it, click on properties, and there go to security. And then as you can see, we have different groups and users. This is obviously different on a Linux machine, and you could also do it on a Windows machine as well. But if you're on Linux, you would use like chmod 600 or something like that. In this case, we could just go into here on Windows, click on Advanced, and then we could just disable inheritance. And then we're just going to go ahead and remove all inherited objects. Click Apply, yes. And if you click on Edit, go ahead, hit Add, and then just you could type in your username. In this case, I have a John username on this machine. Click OK, click Apply, close out of that. And now in this case, when we try to fire off SSH, again, we're doing SSH, and I forgot to mention this in the other. So like I said in the beginning of this video, make sure you specify the correct username. So Ubuntu at IP address with the identity file, and then in my case, I'm using this. You may not have to use that. Go ahead and you should be able to get in. In this case, we're still running into those issues. It'd probably help if I realized that I was still pointing to the previous directory. So this is now changed. So now we should be able to get into it. All right, so let's just do All right, so as you can see, I did SSH, everything I said, identity file, I just fixed to the correct path. And then again, we have that identities only. In this case, we are now on our Linux machine. That is in EC2 instance connect. So if we just do touch file and we create a file, we list it out here. As you can see, if we go into the cloud, go back into our home directory and click ls, we should see the file that we had just created. And that's going to be pretty much it. That's going to cover the basics of setting up an EC2 instance in AWS. There's a few things in this video that I would like to cover in more in depth in another video, such as the VPCs, the route tables, and stuff like that. I plan to cover AWS at length, and I plan to keep going in depth, and hopefully giving you guys tutorials and something to take away for your personal environment or even in your workplace. So that's going to end today's video. I hope you were able to take something away, and as always, never stop learning.